Beneath the elegant halls of Monticello, the grand estate of one of America's most celebrated founding fathers, lies a story that history tried to erase. A story of love and power, of bondage and betrayal. For 2 centuries, the whispers echoed through Virginia's hills. Who were the hidden children of Thomas Jefferson? And why did he spend a lifetime denying their existence? Tonight, we peel back the layers of marble and myth to reveal the chilling truth about the forgotten family of Thomas Jefferson. A story where history meets horror, and silence becomes its own ghost. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we travel deep into the haunting heart of American history. She was young, beautiful, and enslaved, a girl who entered the world of Monticello not as a guest but as property. Sally Hemings' life unfolded under the shadow of one of America's most powerful men, Thomas Jefferson. She served him, traveled with him, and bore the weight of a secret history that few dared to acknowledge. When she was still a teenager, she accompanied Jefferson to Paris, a world away from the plantation's chains, where whispers say their relationship began. Paris was a place of freedom, where slavery was abolished, and yet for Sally, freedom was an illusion bound by loyalty, dependence, and power. She could have stayed in France, lived as a free woman, but she returned to Virginia with Jefferson, returning to a life of servitude because her heart and her family were tethered to his world. Within Monticello, Sally's existence was both visible and unseen. Her presence was known by everyone who served there, yet her story was shrouded in silence. She worked as a chambermaid, tending to Jefferson's quarters, her duties placing her constantly within his private space. The lines between service and intimacy blurred, and soon her life became intertwined with his in ways that defied the boundaries of her status. She was not merely an enslaved woman, she was the mother of several of his children. Children born into bondage, carrying the features of their father. Children who would inherit both his blood and his silence. For Sally, there was no clear line between love and captivity, between affection and control. Jefferson, the man who penned the words, "All men are created equal," exercised ownership over her body and her future. The paradox of their connection reflected the moral fractures of a nation built on freedom, yet sustained by slavery. Every glance, every moment between them carried the weight of forbidden emotion and social hypocrisy. Within those walls, Jefferson was not the philosopher of liberty. He was a man protecting his reputation while entangling himself in a secret that contradicted everything he preached. Historians long denied her significance, dismissing her as a rumor, a scandal unworthy of truth. Yet her story persisted, whispered through generations, carried in the features of her descendants and the unspoken guilt that lingered around Monticello. Sally's life represents the countless voices of women who lived and died without their names recorded in history, whose love, suffering, and resilience existed only in fragments. She was caught in the web of a system that saw her as less than human, yet her endurance became a silent rebellion, a testament to survival within oppression. Even as Jefferson's legacy grew into legend, her story remained in the dark, a shadow moving through the halls of the man who preached equality while keeping her chained to his world. She entered Monticello not as a guest, but as property, a young enslaved woman whose name would one day echo through the forgotten corners of American history. Sally Hemings lived in the shadow of Thomas Jefferson, serving him, traveling with him, and existing within a world that gave her no ownership of her own life. When she accompanied Jefferson to Paris, she stepped into a place where slavery was abolished. Yet even there, her freedom was bound by invisible chains of loyalty, dependence, and unspoken power. She could have chosen to stay, to live as a free woman, but she returned to Virginia with him, a decision that would seal her fate and her silence. Within Monticello, she existed in the strange space between servant and secret, visible to all, yet known by none. Her proximity to Jefferson was constant, her duties intimate, her presence both indispensable and denied. She bore his children, who inherited his features and his silence, growing up in a world that refused to name them as his own. Sally's life became a quiet contradiction, a reflection of a man who wrote of liberty while denying it to those closest to him. Historians tried to erase her, to dismiss her story as myth, but her existence refused to disappear. Whispered through generations and hidden in the bloodline of a nation that built its ideals on freedom while shackling its truth in chains of secrecy. They were born in the shadows of a mansion that stood as a monument to freedom, yet their lives began in bondage. The children of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings carried both the face and blood of the man who enslaved them. Within Monticello, their presence was an open secret, a truth everyone saw but no one dared to speak. They played in the same gardens where their father walked, but when guests arrived, they disappeared into the background, their existence concealed beneath the elegance of his reputation. Each child bore the weight of a contradiction too heavy for their young years. Their father was the author of liberty, and yet they were born without it. Some would later pass into the world of white society, their mixed heritage allowing them to escape the chains that bound their mother, though at the cost of their identity and history. Others remained trapped within Monticello, working as servants, never fully acknowledged by the man whose blood ran through their veins. They were living proof of America's hypocrisy, the silent witnesses to a founding father's hidden life. Their story is not one of rebellion or triumph, but of quiet endurance, of existing between two worlds, one that denied them freedom and another that refused to see them as its own. Each breath they took was a reminder of a legacy that sought to forget them. Yet their truth lingered in the walls, in the whispers, in the faces that could not be denied. Thomas Jefferson lived a life split in two, the public man of reason and democracy, and the private man bound by the very institution he claimed to despise. To the world, he was the voice of liberty, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the philosopher of a new nation built on equality. Yet behind the closed doors of Monticello, another Jefferson existed, one whose actions betrayed his words. He owned more than 600 human beings throughout his lifetime, men, women, and children, who labored to maintain his comfort and his vision of elegance. Among them were those of his own blood, born from his relationship with Sally Hemings, children he never publicly acknowledged. The contrast between his ideals and his reality created a haunting silence that stretched beyond his lifetime. Each speech he gave about freedom became an echo of guilt that seemed to linger in the air of Monticello, mixing with the sounds of chains and the rustle of fields worked by enslaved hands. His intellect could not erase the human suffering that made his world possible. The Jefferson who believed in human dignity and progress also benefited from the exploitation of others, showing that even the greatest minds are capable of the deepest contradictions. The man who dreamed of a nation built on moral virtue lived surrounded by the evidence of moral failure, creating a legacy as brilliant as it was broken, as noble as it was haunted.